Entrepreneurship is so much about being comfortable at that edge. That's where the growth lives.
Allowing the process of co-creation with potential customers and selling with them based on what they want rather over this idea of perfection.
The dynamic between vision and what is my priority right now. Scott, it's really good to see you, man.
You too, dude.
How you been enjoying Colorado summer?
Colorado summer's good, dude. This is a cool place. It's beautiful and it's beautiful. I don't know how else to say it. There's something going on. Yeah.
There's nothing deeper than that, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm really enjoying it out here. I'm finding I want to stay. I don't usually want to stay in places. So
What's that? How come you don't want to stay in places and how come you want to stay here?
great question. I think in the past there was not wanting to stay in places because there was things I wasn't feeling when I would start to stagnate, and ways that because I wasn't feeling it, I couldn't let other people in fully. It was like, ooh, I feel like I don't belong, or I don't feel accepted, or I don't feel like these are my people. And that might have been true, but that was all like a protective mechanism to not actually feel the ways I didn't belong. And I think I've worked through that. And now that I'm available for belonging, I'm like, oh, I actually really like it here. And there are parts I don't like, and I don't need to be part of those.
Congratulations that you found something like that.
Yeah, thanks, man.
And congratulations for a sense of permission to feel belonging. It sounds like has been a part of your journey.
Super.
I am doing well. I've had a really fucking wild like month and a half. The workload that I have with my entrepreneurial endeavors and some other side projects and preparing for a trip and a big launch that was coming up. It was a lot, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, give me the lowdown. What's going on in your sort of entrepreneurial world? You know, the last time we talked, you were navigating a transition from your understanding of entrepreneurship from the lens of day trading into this like facilitation of creating experience and softness in men to like this men group that you were creating, and you had all sorts of little buckets that you were creatively thinking about. So like, what's going on? Give me your entrepreneurial update.
You know, as you noted, there are a lot of different buckets to what I'm doing. I sort of see all the buckets being held in like one major tub of how do we reclaim and expand wholeness.
Before we dive into the sort of like that ecosystem of how do I expand wholeness, for the sake of the audience and for myself, like let's just define terms. What do you mean by wholeness?
Yeah, it's a big term. To me, it's the natural state of being that we come into the world with the potential for, of knowing that we are totally fucking deserving of love and totally loved. And that is nurtured and fostered through our life as we're coming into our sovereignty and our empowerment. When we are the self that knows how to navigate life to make ourselves continually secure and safe, no matter the situation, when we have the resourcefulness to get the resources, no matter the resources, when we have the ability to interface in relationship, even when there's conflict, and come to a place that's okay, like that's the deep empowerment that cultivates safety and that can navigate no matter what the waters are. And so it's like a deep empowerment that's part of the deepest core of who you are. And to me, in being in touch with that skill set and those internal abilities, that's like our wholeness. Our wholeness is the ability of no matter what's breaking outside of me, I have the ability to melt and to mend and repair. So I'm actually never really broken because my ability to rehold myself never goes away.
Are you saying that one is kind of inherently and always complete? Or are you saying one is able to take responsibility and hold themselves together / put themselves back together when breaking or unwholeness occurs?
They're actually not separate.
Yeah.
I'm saying that the latter leads to the former. That so long as you know you always have this ability whenever there are difficult moments that come up to recenter yourself and re-amalgamate your parts, you're actually always whole. Like the temporary moments of fragmentation don't actually matter for a deeper skill set and knowing that knows it always has the ability to recenter.
So your grand mission or sense of contribution to the world is to share that wholeness with whomever crosses your path or your clients or however you want to view that. And as a part of that ecosystem of wholeness creation, you've got buckets that are probably interconnected. Now let's break it down. Tell me what's good.
Most of my bread and butter right now is I work one-on-one with clients. The world calls it coaching, but it's really, high performers who either own businesses and feel like they're sort of at a breaking point, or have made money and don't know now what to do with themselves, or feel like their relationships are stagnating. And it's really, how can we train emotional intelligence? How can we actually empower you to feel the things that you've always known how to feel, but you're resisting in the moment, to come back to whatever your answer set is, knowing in a clarified way when the anger moves, when the sadness moves, when the hurt moves, when you allow yourself to grieve the heartbreak. So that's one of the main buckets I focus on. I've got also a group of men in a men's group that's called Brotherhood Beyond the Mind, where we meet bi-weekly and we, are talking throughout the day. And the main question, we're asking in that container is, how can I actually learn to keep my heart more open to the world and myself? And what are all the ways that my heart is closing down in relationship, at my job, to my boss, to myself? And how can I intentionally open back up my heart? Which is really a deep skill set of like, how have I not learned to say no? How do I not know how to say boundaries? Where am I people pleasing? Where am I holding stories of you rather than just, authentically speaking my truth and finding out where you're at? And it's really a relearning of how to connect with others and be in relationships that feel nourishing rather than draining. To me, the dichotomy between introvert and extrovert actually doesn't really make sense. I think, we are all
Both. Yes.
Yeah, we are both. And of course we have the tendencies to both, but like when we feel safe in communication, in connection, in relationship, like connection's almost always energizing. When I don't need to change you, or like, during this podcast, like, ooh, how do I say this right? And like, how do I posture so this is good? That will always be fucking draining. And like, if I'm showing up in most of my relationships with like, how do I say the right thing so I can feel loved, so I don't feel unloved? Like, we will always be drained by relationship and consider ourselves introverts. But when you can actually just authentically show up as yourself and you get seen more, and then you get to see other people more, like that is innately energizing.
Yeah, and I sort of view them as sort of like skill sets. And I view this also similarly with like, the infamous, am I logical or am I creative? Am I more math oriented or arts oriented or introverted, extroverted? These sort of narratives that we're told we're one or the other. I sort of view them as skill sets, right? Like an introvert, extrovert, I feel as an entrepreneur, but also as a human being, I need to both know how to be with myself in the quiet, without people around me. I need to know how to operate in a loving space when I'm in that place. And then on the extroverted side, when I'm with other people, which, hey, introverts, if you're identifying as an introvert and you want to be an entrepreneur, you got to deal with people. There's no way to not deal with people on the entrepreneurial journey. And so that is a skill set that is just as important, potentially just as nourishing, potentially just as energizing as the other side of being by yourself.
Yeah, it's the same thing in the relationship to ourselves as well, right? Like if I'm trying to manage myself and change myself or constantly fix myself and be like, this is bad, I want this to change, how do I fix it? Rather than just deeply welcoming, loving, and allowing what is, which is the catalyst for change, like the relationship to yourself is always draining. So you'll never want to be with yourself.
It's so hard to view yourself as broken.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. Fucking happens all the time still on my end. Like I am not.
Me too. Scott and I'm an alcoholic viewing myself as broken.
Yeah, I'm definitely not past it, but an alternate perspective is just we're on the path of evolution. We're still becoming. Like, look at the world, look at humanity, look at yourself, right? Like obviously we haven't arrived at our highest state of evolution. I mean, that is just, from my perspective, obvious. And we are inherently whole where we're at. And there's nothing wrong with the journey of getting there.
Totally.
Yeah, it's so fascinating to me.
Yeah, and there's not supposed to be even to evolution and destination, right? Of like, once we get here, that's the goal, and we stopped evolving. It's the same thing in a personal healing journey as it is, on a societal level. It's not like evolution has an end destination, but once we get there, then everything's good, and what's broken will be fixed.
Amen. I agree with that. And that, I think, applies directly to entrepreneurship. Like for me, I've been spending a lot of time thinking about this because I've watched people who just kind of like can't handle the heat. Because entrepreneurship is so much about being comfortable at that edge, at that like leading edge of I've never done this before. Holy shit. Finding new ways to do this and new ways to do that, and new opportunity being seized, and all of that. It's like, if you're not doing it as an entrepreneur, if you're not on that edge, if you're not comfortable with that edge, that's where the growth lives. That's literally the only thing. And so, like for you, I would love to know, what is your edge right now? Like, what are you navigating and trying to figure out as you try to scale? I don't know if you're trying to scale, or as you try to build whatever this business infrastructure, this entrepreneurial gift to the world that you're doing. What's going on the edge?
First bucket, working one-on-one with our high performers. The second bucket, I've got a men's group, Brotherhood Beyond the Mind. The third bucket, retreats called Into the Woods, nature-based facilitation that gives people really experiences of what you were talking about with the boundary waters, more guided in how can we spend 4 days in the natural world to totally reset and restore. And also from there, like in retilling our soil, plant fertile seeds towards connection and momentum in the life we actually want to create. And these are always evolving,
Amen.
At least this in a week or a month, and there will be a different bucket or two, because it's always, and that's sort of the edge of the journey. It's like, when I'm trying to decide what to do, it feels like I'm inducing labor. But I'm like, oh, this is the best thing for me to do now, and this is what people most need, and this is what they want from me. And like, it always feels like I'm paddling upstream against the flow of life, where there's more, and it's not that I'm not choosing and that this is passive, it's totally active, and there's agency here, but there's a deep listening to like an emergent flow of life that's happening, that without me trying to create the buckets themselves, it's like the buckets get presented to me as an intersection of what excites me and my competencies and what people need and are asking from me. And then it's like life being like, hey, do you want to pick up this bucket? And do you want to work with this? So they're always changing. I think that's an edge for me at the moment, is I can see, where I coach is based off first the lived experience that I'm authoring for myself. And then how I'm able to scale that into clients and make it a little bit more general and applicable to more than just Scott's psychology and emotional system. Because it usually is, it's applicable to you, it's applicable to other people, just with different content, but the context is the same. And so where I feel like I'm at an edge is, I guess 2 places come to mind. The first is, I'm seeing from Brotherhood Beyond the Mind, from working with clients, from the work I continually do on myself, there are themes of how I've worked on myself and what sort of thematic problems people are bringing to me. One, with men, it's how do I create the relationship with women that I actually want? And secondly, it's, I've made money, or I've tried the software engineering or what gives me the societal gold stars, and it just doesn't feel right. So now what? It's like, how do I find what actually fulfills me? And I brought myself through a really rigmarole. Yeah.
Rigmarole.
A decade of litmus testing these in myself, and like constantly evolving and iterating, the past several months, especially on like romantic relationships. And so I really actually want to create containers around those for more men who are seeking them, of what are actually like the architecture, like the legs that lead to the foundation of a good table of romantic relationships, or an alive, fulfilling professional journey.
And so when you say, I want to back up here for a second. When you say that the two edges that you're sort of experiencing and how the clientele that you're attracting are the ones that are of a sort of similar container or a similar process, are you saying that both you and your clients are navigating this, how do I create a life that manifests the love that I actually want? Are you sort of seeing yourself in their in that same energy and therefore feeling like you're navigating it together? Or are you saying you worked on those sorts of things well enough to feel positioned to help people break through that as well?
Yeah. So I'm getting to the edge, and it's the latter. And like, I'm not fully healed or arrived in either of these journeys, but there's been enough work that I can actually see people's repeated patterns and help them identify, feel through them, and then hopefully actuate and create what they want to. So where the edge is actually iterating to create the containers without knowing what the containers are going to be ahead of time, and allowing the process of co-creation with potential customers and selling with them based on what they want, rather over this idea of perfection, like iteration and prototyping over perfection. So when the time's perfectly right, and when I feel the perfect amount of abundance to test with this, and when I feel I have this perfect in my head, 25, like that's the time to create, which is just like, that's all a fucking fallacy based on fear of like, what would happen if I don't get it perfectly right? And so that's one of the main edges, and allowing myself to continue to create the sort of academy that I'd like to, of practices helping really good men become great men. And just like allowing the creation to come rather than needing to do too much preliminary work to try and design it to be absolutely perfect, as a way to protect from like the fear of like, oh, what if this doesn't get designed perfectly right? What if this goes wrong?
And when you say this, is this a digital thing?
Digital, eventually I'd like it to have more like in-person roots and not to retreats and events and experiences. I could see it really would be like a holistic support system for men who want, better relationship with women and finances and learning breath work and how to be more emotionally literate and intelligent. But I think it would start digital. Yeah.
So then I think here's a really good question. So like, why men? Why men instead of entrepreneurs or people or musicians or Colorado, whoever shows up? Like, why men?
It's a great question. And I don't see the work ultimately being limited to men. I never chose to work with men. It wasn't on my bingo card for Scott Haber's life, like I'd be working with men. It's more when I'm listening to the people who are asking for it and wanting my work. I work with women too. I work with couples, but there's more men that are coming my way, and more men who I can see are really struggling and earnestly desiring the work. So that just feels like when I'm honoring like what's coming to my front door, I'm just opening it up to like what's there and what I'm available for. I think the whole world really could use it, and you bring it to corporations and they could use it, and you bring it to nonprofits and certainly couples, right? That's where a lot of coupleship, breaks down, a relationship breaks down, and like, rather than feeling how you feel and speaking your authentic truths, like feeling you have to filter yourself to not feel your feelings, or protect somebody from a truth to not feel emotional consequence. That's like where resentment forms. And I think men are in a really unique place based on, as we were talking at the start, like not having, this is like a conversation in a men's group like every other day. Like we don't have positive mentors. What does even healthy masculinity fucking mean? What does masculinity mean? And there's been so much pendulating and calibrating in this, and like alpha masculinity and no toxic masculinity. And like, it's a sort of bewildering space of like, what does it mean to be a healthy man in the world? And like, also keep your heart open.
You have mentioned one of your edges being a sort of surrendered co-creator with the world, where you're not trying to force it, you're not trying to demand it, you're not even trying to you're trying to not make it perfect before you launch the sort of thing. What is, because for me in that dynamic, there's the vision, right? And a mind like yours can think very big picture. right? I want this, I want this, I want this, I need this much capital for this. Like if I wrote you a check for $10 million right now, you could use it all in ways that are very beneficial. And you probably don't have the $10 million that would probably take to accomplish some of these bigger missions, bigger visions. And so one of the things that I always have struggled with, and I think I have a lot to say about it, but I think you do too, but that is the dynamic between vision and what is my priority right now? And how am I creating progress that is meaningful and intentional towards that vision, but also laser focused instead of a bunch of small lines in a bunch of different directions or whatever, which is sometimes what I struggle with. A meaningful and intentional stride, that what I mean, that balance between vision, big picture, and intentional focused implementation.
Totally. That's I would imagine at the heart of any builder, visionary, entrepreneurial journey. I could speak to a little bit how I'm thinking about this.
So, gimme.
Yeah. So the first is just on an internal architecture and like an emotional indicator, which is the good shit sticks. Like one of my mentors said, many leaves will fall from a forest. Many leaves will fall from a tree, and only the ones that stick with you are like your leaves to take home. Like
what's meant for you won't pass you by.
Yeah, you'll have a lot of ideas, and the things that really remain are either yours to work on or your work. Like either way, it's yours to heal or yours to work on the things that really stick. And so I'm noticing too constantly of like, obviously I have many ideas. There's a new one that's come up that I love, but I'm noticing not only the duration, but in what place has this found me? In a place of wholeness, of knowing my safety and my security and my lovability, am I actually still interested in the idea, which is a really positive sign? Or is it a place of like, man, I just missed that client, or I didn't facilitate as well, or the date didn't go well. Ooh, that idea sounds really good, which usually is a leading indicator that it's a surrogate for the lovability that you're missing, that you think you're missing in the moment. And you're thinking like, ooh, this idea can really make, like, what would happen if this idea worked? Like, how many clients would I land? How much money would I make? How well would people see me? And if you notice that script going on, it's usually, at least for me, a sign of like, oh, I'm looking for lovability in this idea. And those ideas never last long, because once you come back to a more centered, secure old place, that doesn't interest me so much. The second frame and how I'm looking at this more practically, I guess that was pretty practical, but another practical frame for it is I kind of view it cliche, but like I'm hiking a major like trip on the Appalachian Trail, and I can see like 80 miles in the distance, like the vista of how I'm evolving and what I see like I want to create and what that vision is. Like I have a sense of like what I want that to look like in 10 years. And as you get closer, like the mountain looks different. So it's not to say it doesn't evolve, but it's like as I'm walking and I can see the mountain in the distance, I can know if the shorter steps, the more digestible, like I can chunk off these tasks or actions, are those actually on the path of bringing me to the mountain that I think I'm hiking to way in the distance? Like, do those actually feel on target? And sometimes there's obviously some delineation, which is necessary for your pathfinding abilities. To know like, oh, that's not the path. Great. This is what the path feels like. Now I don't need to get in that trap 5 miles down the road. Like I can see how the short-term tasks I'm building in my life, or the containers or the ways I'm working, how those buckets actually map and help me to become the person I need to become for the longer term picture and goal of the life of Scott Haber that I've placed.
Yeah, but one of the things that I had heard, I forget from who, but really landed with me, is in entrepreneurship, it's less about what you're building and more about who you're becoming.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you reflected that in a way that it is really relatable to me. One of the things I'm curious about is like, what is your metrics right now of success? Like, what metrics are you really interested in bringing growth to as an entrepreneur right now?
Okay. As an entrepreneur, I would say how much I'm iterating and feeling willing to experiment with what's exciting. What's exciting is another huge leading indicator, but how much I'm iterating on what's exciting.
Is that like a hard metric, or is that more of like a soft frame of mind?
Objective, like KPIs?
Sure, if that's what you want to share.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I'm going to put some out there that might be, I guess I have judgments of them of more surface, but I don't have, I was talking to a client and I don't actually have many need for hard deliverables. Like my hard deliverable was like, are my clients developing?
That is that's great. And then how are you measuring that, right? Like because when you have that data, you can use it to position yourself and all of that. Like for me right now, I have two focuses. One, I want the agency to have more money, because right now as a team, it's just, well, money is nice. We do good things with it, And then the second is process. Really, process right now is my focus. I want to improve processes. I want to make onboarding processes simpler and more streamlined across all of the different buckets. Yes. And those are like my two laser focused things that I'm running after. I'm curious if you have anything like that right now.
So I would say metric internal or individually is, financially, how well is it going? Metric for my clients is how are they developing? And that's really specific to their goals of, are their relationships actually improving, and are they able to meet more tension and more conflict with more ease and drive more love in their lives? Are they actually developing in their business and growing their business the way they want to? Are they actually getting business opportunities that make them feel more alive and give them more energy? If they were to rate like how they're doing on a scale of 1 to 10, are we actually trending upward? Which is, I just continue to be surprised. Like after I worked with someone for 6 months, like, I was a 3 or 4 when we started, but now I'm like hovering around 7 or 8, sometimes 9. So that's a good objective metric for it. I also like to see they often become not only their own teachers and need me less, but they're showing up as mentors to other people without trying. It's like they've developed this skill set so implicitly, and like the natural thing to happen is you actually just show up in a way that supports others to develop it too.
This is probably an interesting question. And, maybe this sort of question isn't even how you think, but to what scale are you wanting to take this thing?
Yeah, I would like it to be large in scale, and I'm not sure if it's going to be the coach, like the one-on-one coaching is one-on-one, and I would like that to be as high leverage as it can to have more impact in the system. Really working with high-performing athletes and top level founders, and I work with really awesome people already, so that's the scale there. Or the emotional work, where that's more men's containers and what I'm going to be calling Emotional Literacy Academy. I would like that to scale to corporations. I don't know how widely or how largely. I would like it to eventually be self-sustaining, where corporations are learning and then teaching new employees who come on board, and it's creating this like attractive system that actually feels like a connected and harmonious place to work. Things we haven't talked about, but when it comes to like my writing or idea sets that are forming based on that, I want those to scale as fucking large as they can. Like I would like us to, I think the scale of what I'm thinking in is like, what does a beautiful future look like for humans and non-humans to live in, that we actually desire to live in, where people feel safe and nourished, and where ecosystems that are diverse and lively and abundant and healthy and thriving are part of our lives. And so I'm thinking of some of my longer term projects with my writing and event series we're thinking of putting on, like, I'm thinking of how does this scale to the whole thing?
I think that's a beautiful way to end. This has really been a treat for me. I've had a really exerted 3, 4, 5 days, but I'm leaving feeling energized, feeling grateful that I know someone like you, and with a resounding like, yeah, man, believe in you. You're doing it. You're up to it. It's happening. And thanks for taking the time to have a conversation with me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure equally. Whenever we speak, I walk away both feeling deeply seen and like I've had a brother for my entire life. So
I think Colorado is in the future.
I would love that. I'd really love that.